All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started. I'm Dr. Kay Stefanik, the Assistant Director of the Iowa Nutrient Research Center. I want to welcome you all to our Spring 2026 seminar series, Status of Nutrient Reduction Strategies in Upper Mississippi River Basin States. This semester, we've had speakers from Wisconsin and Minnesota. Today we'll have Illinois, and then next month will be Indiana. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. First, please type any questions you have into the chat box and I will read them to our speaker at the end of the presentation. And second, this webinar will be recorded and posted to the INRC website along with previous seminar recordings. For today's talk, we have Trevor Sample. Trevor has worked at the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency for 24 years and currently serves as the agency coordinator for the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. He previously worked as a project manager in the Bureau of Water Watershed Management Section, managing total maximum daily load studies and Section 319 grants. Trevor represents the Illinois EPA on several boards and councils, including the Illinois Nutrient Research and Education Council and Illinois Certified Crop Advisory Board, and serves as the Illinois representative on the Hypoxia Task Force. He will be presenting on the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy update. With that, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone. Excited to be here today to discuss Illinois' nutrient loss reduction strategy, kind of talk about how the strategy has evolved over time and kind of where we're at right now, give you a little bit of background of how we implement our strategy. Our strategy is co-led by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the Illinois Department of Agriculture, and the University of Illinois Extension. So our strategy was released in July of 2015, so it's been a little over 10 years. We started developing it back in 2013. We worked with the University of Illinois to develop a science assessment. And then we have had a very public process of developing the strategy where we formed a policy working group composed of 25 different organizations covering agriculture, point sources, urban stormwater, state and federal agencies, conservation, environmental groups. It establishes a 45% reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus, like most other strategies, in line with the Gulf Hypoxia Action Plan. We do have interim milestones, 2025, a 25% reduction in phosphorus and 15% reduction in nitrate loads. Illinois has not established a long-term timeline for meeting the 45%. And of course, the Hypoxia Task Force goals are 20% reduction for nitrogen and phosphorus, so we differ from them there a little bit. Our strategy addresses nutrient loads from three main sources: agriculture, point sources, which consist of industrial and municipal wastewater treatment facilities, and urban stormwater. I'm not going to go through our whole strategy, but just kind of summarize each sector. So for agriculture, we recommend voluntary best management practices, agriculture conservation practices. So we break them up into in-field, edge-of-field, and land use changes. So for nitrate, it's nitrate management in terms of using the MRT and calculator for rates, inhibitors, split applications, following the 4Rs. Cover crops for edge-of-field wood chip bioreactors. Stream buffers on non-tiled land. We have a lot of tiled land in Illinois, so things like constructed wetland saturated buffers, wood chip bioreactors to treat the nitrate in tile lines. And then land use changes such as perennial energy crops on marginal land. For total phosphorus, we recommend reduced tillage, nutrient management, soil testing, cover crops, structural practices like terrace and wascobs, slow erosion, stream buffers, and then again, perennial energy crops on marginal land. So we took all of those different practices and combined them into different scenarios to see overall, can we get a 45% reduction when these are implemented at scale? And when I say at scale, it's usually in millions of acres treated. And so we had a couple of them, the MP2 and MP3 scenarios that showed that when fully implemented, we could potentially reach that 45% reduction for both nitrate and phosphorus. So we take these different scenarios then. This is actually showing a couple of different scenarios that we developed later in 2019. The scenario NP7 is for the interim goals, and then scenario NP8 was for long-term goals. It's just another way of showing the different practices. Our scenarios are not prescriptive, they're just informative. But we can take a look at these and then track progress over time if we're how close we're getting to meeting those goals in terms of the ag sector conservation practices. So the blue bars show where we think we need to be for those different scenarios to meet the goals, and then the orange bars show progress we're making over time as we track those practices in terms of what's being implemented. On the urban stormwater side, we have our MS4 permits. I'll talk about those in a little bit. We prioritize implementation of green infrastructure. We offer and promote technical assistance for green infrastructure, urban stream bank stabilization, restoration, and then we encourage stormwater collaboratives, and we have several of those in the state. On the point source side, of course, this is administered by Illinois EPA, the NPDES permit system for the wastewater treatment plants. We really are focusing on total phosphorus limits, especially for the major facilities. That's anything over 1 million gallons per day discharge. We worked on having all of them complete feasibility and optimization studies for nutrient removal. We also have something called nutrient assessment reduction plans, which is kind of a watershed approach, taking into account getting permits down to a certain limit, whether it's 1 milligram or half a milligram per liter total phosphorus, and then also looking at what else can be done in the watershed to reduce those nutrient loads. And then we encourage urban stormwater planning groups, and we have several of those as well. We do have priority watersheds like most states. We prioritize these by total loads. We also looked at local water quality concerns, and then also looked at those that have TMDLs or active watershed plans. So the watersheds in blue are priority for nitrate loss. Those in orange are for phosphorus loss. The ones with hashes on them are for point source priorities, and then those are in red. Those are source water protection areas. It was called the ag groups had a program called Keep It for the Crop. This was even before we started our nutrient strategy as a way to engage local drinking water sources in areas where we had TMDLs for nitrate, and we knew that we had some nitrate impairments and phosphorus as well. And so this was a way of addressing some public water supply issues. Within those priority watersheds, like I said, one of our other co-leads on this is University of Illinois Extension, and we have some watershed outreach associates. So Rachel Curry serves as a statewide coordinator, and then under her is Nicole Haverback, works in those nitrogen priority watersheds where the stars are, and Luke Zwilling works in the phosphorus priority watersheds and the Embroil and Wabash. And so they are there as sort of on the ground folks providing watershed education and outreach, work with local watershed groups for watershed planning and implementation. They also produce podcasts and blogs. They have over 70 podcasts have been developed over the last few years. Then they also put out a monthly NLRS newsletter. So I mentioned that we had put together a policy work group when we were developing this strategy, and this work group continues as we implement the strategy. And the strategy also set up several other subgroups. So we have an agriculture water quality partnership forum with a technical subgroup under that, nutrient monitoring council, urban stormwater working group with the education tracking subgroups. We have a nutrient science advisory committee that no longer meets. Their objective was to develop nutrient criteria for rivers and streams for total nitrogen and phosphorus. That was developed in 2018, but there hasn't been any action on those to date. And then we also have the performance benchmark working group and a communication subgroup. Most of these groups meet at least once or twice a year. Some of them are as needed. All of the agendas, presentation, meeting minutes are available on our Illinois EPA Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy website. So this just shows the structure of the policy working group participants. In addition to being on the policy working group, a lot of these same groups are also represented on all the other subgroups. And then we have a lot of other organizations that are represented on those subgroups as well. I would say altogether, we're probably looking at close to 50 different partners that interact with us through those working groups. So in terms of reporting, like a lot of other states, they put out annual or biennial reports. So starting in 2017, we started putting out a biennial reports as a way to report on implementation and the progress in implementing the strategy, but also served as a way to update the strategy. So we looked at this as being a living document. We also have what we call our logic model. This may look familiar because we borrowed this from Iowa and then their strategy. It's just a way of looking at the different metrics that we report on for each sector for point source agriculture and urban stormwater. So we report on the resources in terms of the funding and the people that are working on this issue, outreach in terms of meetings and conferences and field days, land and facility measures where we're tracking progress of implementation of the point source loads and ag conservation practices and urban stormwater practices and outreach. And then the water, which is the nutrient loads themselves. Just an example of our table of contents, we have an executive summary, an introduction, an update to the science assessment, which would usually involve updates to the water quality loads and any other research that was going on that was relevant, and then updates for each of the sectors. We would report on our working group accomplishments from all the meetings that we would have. And then we also included an adaptive management and measuring progress section. So I'm going to turn now to the water quality side of things. Since 2015, Illinois EPA has partnered with USGS to implement a statewide nutrient export loading network, or otherwise we call it our continuous monitoring network. We have 8 gauges located at the mouths of our major watersheds. We have another one displaying for measuring what comes out of the Chicago area, but those 8 main gauges that are listed there are the ones that we use to calculate our statewide loads. It covers about 75% of the state, and USGS has ways of modeling and estimating the ungauged areas. So in terms of these super gauges for each site, this shows what parameters are taken. At one time when we first started out, of course, we didn't have the phosphate probes, but those came along a little bit later. But over time, USGS was able to establish a correlation between turbidity and phosphate for several of these streams. So the ones where we're not collecting phosphate, they were using turbidity as a surrogate for phosphate, so we can still get those phosphorus loads. But we do still have phosphate gauges on the Kaskaskia and the Illinois. And these parameters are taken in about 15-minute intervals. So I want to take you back to our 2023 biennial report in terms of water quality and where we were. Looking at the 5-year average, which is what we base our progress on, is looking at 5-year averages, looking from 2017 to 21, comparing everything to that 80 to 96 baseline that most states use, that the Hypoxia Task Force uses. We want to be down here for nitrate for that 15% reduction as we get closer to that 2025 year. And 25% for phosphorus. Instead, what we were seeing was 4.8% increase in nitrate, a 35% increase in phosphorus, and a lot of that was driven by the fact that our water yield was up 23%. So here's a graph from USGS, but this is taking us from 1980 to 2024. The orange line is that rolling 5-year average. The red line is the 5-year stream flow, showing how stream flow can influence loads. Then the blue bars are our annual numbers. So as you can see, a lot of this is being driven by 2019. We had our highest phosphorus loads that we had recorded that year. It was a very wet year, and we lost a lot of phosphorus that year. And so that year, and even 2020, we're really driving that 5-year load. Nitrates, on the other hand, we've seen some reductions in it. And if you see that 5-year average is actually dipped below that 15% bar. So looking at the water year 24, these numbers are still preliminary. USGS should be finalizing these any day now. Looking at the 4-year average of 2021 to 24 compared to that 8096 baseline, nitrate's actually down 30%. There's no change in phosphorus and stream flows down 10%. Looking at the current 5-year average of 2020 to 2024, phosphorus is up 12%, nitrate down 19%, stream flows up 2%. So you can see we've so far met that goal of the 15% nitrate reduction by 2025. However, water year 25 ended in September 30th of 25. And so right now, USGS is in the process of screening the data, doing their modeling and analysis. So we won't have preliminary water year 25 data until this fall. And we'll present that at our nutrient strategy conference that we have every year. It's usually held in November. And then that will be finalized the following March. So about this time next year, we should be able to have the final data to compare how we did in terms of the uh, 2025 year load goals. Something else on the water quality side we do is we've had USGS update our 5-year averages. So every 5 years, we've developed Huck 8 scale loads and yields in addition to the statewide loads. So we can see where in the state our hotspots are and where we're losing more in terms of pounds per acre and pounds per watershed. And they developed the interactive dashboard tool where you can select the time period and whether you want to look at loads or yields, whether you want the statewide load or estimate. And then you have these graphs that correspond when you hover over one of the watersheds. So I have the link there to that if you're interested in viewing that. I'm going to move now to the agriculture sector. This is from our 2023 binary report, reporting on data from 21 and 22. Again, we look at those funding resources. We think to the logic model with the funding and then the outreach in terms of all of our partners give us this information in terms of how many events they held and presentations and field days and the reported attendance so we can track that. Of course, we also track the state and federal cost share programs. A lot of other states do that too, from Conservation Reserve Program to all of NRCS's programs, CSP, EQIP, Wetlands, Water Quality Initiative, MRBI. Our Department of Agriculture has our Partners for Conservation program that pays for conservation practices with state funding. They also have a cover crop premium discount program and a few others new ones that I'll be talking about in a little bit. And then we have our 319 Mountain Point Source Grant Program, and then our Illinois Department of Natural Resources administers the CREP program. And so we take all that data and we're able to graph it. This is just an example of looking at the EQIP and CSP programs, or each year we can, the bars show how much was implemented that year in terms of acres. And then we have the cumulative bar, but then we have to subtract off every 5 years as those practices could potentially drop off. And then we take the practices that we recommend in the table that I showed earlier. We track those practices individually for each program as well. And we do this. I'm just showing you the EQIP and CSP, but we do this for all of those other programs, state and federal programs that I showed you as well, to show how much of each practice that we recommend is being implemented in the state. We also have our partner updates. This is a big part, especially on the ag side of things. We have a lot of our partners have developed projects and programming specifically to meet the goals of the nutrient loss reduction strategy. And on the agriculture side, this is really where it all happens. We know we will have our state and federal programs, but we don't know that we'll never have enough funding from those to fully meet our goals. And so our partners really step in, have developed their own programs based on their resources and what they think needs done, the best ways to reach farmers through technical and financial assistance. So we have sections where they're able to give summaries of updates of the programs that they administer and have links to all of those websites. As of the 23 report, we had about 39 different agriculture programs related to the strategy that we're reporting on. It's probably been a few more added since then. So again, we really couldn't do what we're doing on the agriculture side without all of our partner support. I also want to talk a little bit about in Illinois, we also have a Nutrient Research and Education Council. It was created in 2012. And it's funded through an assessment of $1.25 per ton fertilizer sold. It was originally a dollar, but a couple of years ago, they upped it to $1.25. So a dollar is sent to INRC, 25 cents of that goes to the Department of Agriculture for their fertilizer inspection program. The funding annually is between about 3.5 and a little over 4 million. To date, there's been about 48 million in research funding invested. Currently have about 32 projects, and these projects cover everything from cover crops to nutrient management, conservation, tillage, edge of field practices, and more. So we're very fortunate to have INREC and all of the research that they do. In terms of in Illinois, we want everything that we do and all the practices that we're recommending to be backed by strong science. And through all the years of research we have INREC and continuing research, we're able to provide that. Moving now to the point source sector. We use 2011 as our baseline for implementation for point source and non-point source. That was the last year that we had data as we started developing our science assessment back in 2013. So everything's always based on the 2011 loads. So I'm showing here that as of 2024, we've had about a 10% reduction in nitrate. But phosphorus is really what we're focusing on reducing from the point source side. As of 2024, we actually have a reduction of 46% from the baseline load that we've reduced. That's 8.3 million pounds. And for a little perspective, in the 2023 Hypoxia Task Force Point Source report, Arkansas had Kentucky and Missouri. When you add that up, that's the equivalent of their entire major municipal point source discharge. So we're excited to see that, to see this progress that we're making on the point source side in phosphorus. I also have the last bar there showing when all major municipals are meeting 0.5 milligrams per liter concentration. This is an estimate of where we think we are. So eventually, maybe in the next 10 years, we should be close to about a 75% reduction point source from total phosphorus. So in Illinois, we have 211 major municipal water reclamation facilities. We currently have about 60 facilities that have an annual average of 0.5 to 1 milligram phosphorus and another 44 are below 0.5. We have about 60 nutrient assessment reduction plans that accounts for about 152 facilities altogether. Some facilities developed them on their own. Some did them as a group in a watershed. And all of our facilities have completed optimization feasibility studies for nitrogen and phosphorus removal. Moving now to the stormwater sector. In terms of reporting, we have our annual inspection reports that all the MS4 facilities have to submit. The University of Illinois Extension has staff that goes through those and pulls out information so we can see what sort of practices are being implemented through the MS4 program. Illinois EPA will pay for green infrastructure programs. We also have a separate green infrastructure opportunities grant program that's just wrapping up. The last 5 years paid for green infrastructure implementation. The Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, Greater Chicago, has a green infrastructure program. They give us information on that. And we have a lot of other programming, a lot of it through University of Illinois Extension on urban stormwater implementation and programs that we use that for sources of data for tracking and reporting. So that's kind of the strategy in a nutshell in terms of where we have been. I'm going to talk to you about a few recent updates now that we're working on. I want to talk about a few programs of our Department of Agriculture. I'd mentioned that fall coverage for spring savings cover crop premium discount program. So it promotes additional acres of cover crops not covered by other state and federal program. And the applicants will receive a premium discount program of $5 per acre and following your crop insurance for each acre of cover crop that they plant. And this is just showing some data. It started back in 2019 at 50,000 acres. The blue bars show the acres that were submitted in the applications. So there was a much more demand than what was originally offered. So after 2 years of seeing that, they doubled the amount. This is all through state appropriated funding. So they got another 100,000. And by 22, they had 160,000 for the 23-24 year. They had 140,000. 24-25, they up to 200,000. And then they were back down to about 190,000 for the 25-26 year. And the last 3 years, we have used some of our Gulf hypoxia funding to pay for additional acres. Another program that they recently introduced is called iCover. It's $7 million program. It's funded with a mix of state of Illinois and USDA NRCS funds. These are RCP funds. They're 3 year contracts to cover the same acre. The program payment rates are pretty lucrative. It's $61.13 for single cover crop species that's winter killed, 85.65 an acre for a single species spring terminated, and then 105.40 per acre for multi-species spring terminated. They also recently rolled out the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant called the Climate Smart Agriculture Program. This is going to focus on implementing cover crops on 644,653 acres over 3 years. Applicants will receive $35 per acre on the same year. All fields are currently not enrolled in other state or federal programs. They can implement no-till or strip-till practices regardless of past implementation or not. So it can be those that are already implementing these practices are still eligible. Wanted to talk a little bit about our Gulf hypoxia program, the funding that we received. We have done 2 separate work plans. The first work plan is completed. For the first one, helped pay for some of the work conducted by our watershed outreach associates. It also helped pay for the production of the 2023 biennial report. We use it to fund our USGS super gauges. We also started doing an ag retail survey, very similar to what the Iowa INRC implements, following that same methodology. And we'll be paying for that the next few years. We also, like I said, have put some fundings for $40,000 acre a year over 2 years for the spring savings program cover crops. And then we also purchased a nitrate analyzer for the Department of Ag for conducting nitrate analysis on groundwater samples. So we're in the middle of now of our second work plan. Again, we're continuing to fund the super gauges with USGS. We'll be doing 3 more years of ag retail survey. We'll be spending more on the cover crop insurance premium discount program. And we also developed a demonstration grant for edge of field practices for installing wood chip bioreactors, saturated buffers, and constructed wetlands. We've selected 2 projects. One of them will be implementing 5 wood chip bioreactors. The other one will be implementing 3 constructed wetlands. So what we're most excited about right now, we didn't put out a 2025 biennial report because we made the decision with input from policy working group. We are seeing a lot of other states are starting to move to online dashboards. Iowa and Minnesota have these. And so we thought that that'd be a good idea to move these from these very thick PDF or printed reports to something that's a little more interactive and more visual. So we are partnering with the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center. Many of you may be familiar with the work they do with Great Lakes to Gulf. And it's hosted by the University of Illinois National Center for Supercomputing Applications. So the data portal will be replacing our biennial reports. What we have up there so far is data through 2022, as was founded our 23 biennial report. We're currently uploading the 23 through 25 data this year. After that, we will then update it annually. We'll be putting out annual executive summaries. We are in the process of developing the interactive maps. The point source map is largely done. We do have a link for that Huck 8 water quality tool that USGS developed I showed you earlier. And eventually, all this data will be downloadable in spreadsheets. We do have a science team that's part of our nutrient strategy based out of the University of Illinois. We have several researchers. Their job largely is to provide technical assistance to our watershed outreach associates. And we also have a process in place for adding new practices. And so they oversee approval of that process of approving new practices. But right now, Dr. Andrew Marganon is working on stream bank erosion, trying to quantify statewide how much nutrients we're losing, especially phosphorus from stream bank erosion. Iowa came out with a number a few years ago, and so we're doing that here in Illinois as well. We know something that's been unaccounted for in the future that we just assumed was part of the non-point source agriculture contribution, knowing that that really wasn't the case. We didn't have the data at the time to tease that out. So hopefully in another year or so, we'll have some numbers on stream bank erosion contribution to nutrient loads. He's also working on updating our conservation practice performance. That table that I showed of all the practices that we recommend and track, some of those practice performances haven't been updated since they were adopted in the strategy back in 2015. We've had a lot of work, particularly through the Nutrient Research Education Council on these practices. So we're going to look back and do a meta literature analysis and update the practice performance for all of those conservation practices that we recommend. And Dr. Ben Pang is working on a HUC 12 watershed nutrient inventory. So we have loads and yields on the HUC 8 scale, but this is taking it deeper into the HUC 12 to see maybe where there's hot spots within those watersheds where we think we may be losing more nutrient loads than others, and we can prioritize those for future implementation. So this is all kind of revolves around us wanting to update our report. Like I said, we've always treated this as a living document, and we've always done updates through our binary reports, but we always still refer back to that original 2015 document as our strategy. No other states have been doing 5-year or 10-year updates on their strategies. We don't feel like we're quite there yet. Our science teams has addressed some data gaps. We discussed this recently when our policy working group meetings, so we just need to identify costs and who can do some of this research. So this is some work done by Dr. Payne putting together sort of what we want to prioritize, how we reduce it, and how we'll get there. And so some of this work is already ongoing, and some of this is we feel is still needed to answer some of these questions before we develop a new strategy. So that's all I have for today. If you'd like to visit our web pages, the Illinois EPA webpage that has all of our reports and all of the working group meeting minutes and agendas and presentations, along with a lot of other background documents and all the information on how we develop the strategy is found there. University of Illinois Extension also has a website for the strategy. Have the link there for the data portal, as well as the podcast and the blog that Extension does. And then we have an email for our general nutrient strategy contact information.
All right, well, thank you for that talk. Before we get into the questions, we have advertisement for the next seminar. The next INRC seminar will be on May 13th, and our presenter is Julie Harold. She's going to be talking about Indiana's state nutrient reduction strategy, programs, practices, and priorities. And on the next slide, there is information on where you can access all of our seminar recordings. You can either go to this website or you can use the QR code. And we have recordings of not just this semester's seminars, but also back to when we started in 2020. Okay, we've had some questions come in. Looking at your load graphs, is some of the load reduction influenced by about 4 years of dry weather?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, we've shown that it's gone down and that stream flow uh, line is going down. So yeah, it a lot of that is tied to could be tied to that. But if you remember the looking at the 5-year average, nitrate was down 19%, but overall the stream flow was still up 2%. So um, I think that shows that some management measures are taking effect and having a positive influence on that nitrate going down.
And then could you just quickly give a reminder of what your interim reduction goals were?
Sure. So it's 15% nitrate and 25% phosphorus.
Can you talk more about the optimization plans the municipalities did? How long did they get to complete, and was there an agency to help with this? Who paid for it?
I can just tell you that they pay for themselves. I'm not on the point source side of things. I'm more on the non-point source watershed management side of things. So I can't give a lot of background on the optimization plans other than that it was put in their permits that they were to do them. And as far as I know, there was no assistance in terms of financial assistance for doing that. That was the same way with the feasibility studies. It was a condition of their permits to do it.
So I think that is what I have for questions. So if you still have some questions, please get those into the chat. I also saw that Matt Helmers posted a link to, I believe it is the interactive map with the Huck 8 level information.
Thank you.
Then you had mentioned that you have an annual meeting in November. Would you mind just talking a little bit about what that meeting entails, who's invited? Um,
Sure. Yeah, we've been having these just about annually since our report came out. Yeah, they're open to the public. They started out all in person, and then COVID hit, and we had it during over Zoom. We still kept all of our meetings going. You pivoted everything to Zoom, but then afterwards, everyone sells that expectation of in-person meetings also having online as well. So some of our meetings are hybrid. So the conference is hybrid. You can attend in person or online. It's open to anyone, and it's usually it just covers whatever information we have, especially on years where we issue binary reports. It would be going through the report, highlighting all the updates of the sectors. We usually have an update from some of our partners and from USGS on the water loads. So. Uh, yeah, and all of the past presentations for those are on our website as well. If you want to look through the presentations, we do have a conference page as part of our nutrient strategy website.
I
oh,
think Adam Schneider's had his hand raised. So,
yeah, Adam, if you want to
Thanks.
go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Hey, Trevor, thanks for your presentation. Good to
I
see you. Yeah, the point source progress is impressive. That's awesome. I guess one of the questions, are you seeing more of those facilities? And it seems like it's both for nitrogen and phosphorus, if I saw that slide correctly. Are they doing more like infrastructure investment upgrades to their technology, or are they doing more kind of tweaks and optimization as far as meeting those targets?
I'd say it's both, but eventually every major facility most of them will be at point 0.5, and that's the condition of the permits. So they will be either using chemical phosphorus removal, phosphorus biological removal, or nutrient biological removal. And there's different years for different meeting those goals. So if it's chemical, I think they're supposed to be meeting it by 2025. If they're implementing biological phosphorus removal, they have till 2030, and if they're implementing biological nutrient removal, they have till 2035. So by 2035, most of those facilities should be meeting zero point 0.5, unless there's something else in their permit that allows them something else.
And it looks like Rachel Curry has added some additional links in the chat. These look like they are the extension related links for the Nutrient Loss Reduction podcast, blog, as well as their website.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel.
Like we're getting lots of comments thanking you. Great presentation. And that is all I am seeing for questions. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Nope. I'd like to thank everyone for coming and listening, and I'm looking forward to the next one, hearing Julie.
Right, well, thank you again for your presentation, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks a lot, Trevor. It was great to hear from you.